This is Thames Television. Now for the very latest news, national and international, we join Fiona Armstrong at ITN.
"24 killed as gales batter Britain." Chaos on roads and railways with winds up to 110 miles an hour. More protests for Gatting's cricketers in South Africa. And Ava Gardener dies in London at 68. Good evening. At least 24 people have been killed in fierce storms and hurricane winds battering all of Britain at land and sea. Among the victims were 2 young children killed at their schools. The actor Gordon Kaye, star of the television series Allo Allo, is fighting for his life after a freak accident. A chunk of wood caught by the wind crashed through the windscreen of his car and hit him on the head. Trains in many parts of the country are at a complete standstill. Roads are in chaos. Dover has closed down its Channel ferries. Damage is already in many millions of pounds. So far, southern England, Ireland and Wales have borne the brunt of it, but the storm is moving north tonight.
The effects of the storm were felt right across the south of England. In Hampshire, dozens of roads were blocked as vehicles overturned. The driver of this van was among the lucky ones who escaped without serious injury. Along the seafront at Brighton, gales ripped the roofs off some shelters and demolished others. Bathing huts were lifted up and scattered along the front. Dozens of walls collapsed and many old chimney stacks were reduced to rubble. As mountainous seas battered the shore, the ferry companies suspended all cross-channel sailings from Dover. In Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire, 2 men died when the cab of their pickup truck was flattened. It was the people of the West Country who felt the first effects of the storm. Throughout the area, road transport was disrupted as winds toppled lorries and spilled their loads. The Severn Bridge was closed to traffic for just the 3rd time in its 23-year history, but not before 1 lorry fell victim to the storm. As well as blocking roads, fallen trees have caused thousands of pounds worth of damage. In Swindon, an 11-year-old girl died and 2 other children were in hospital after the roof of a school caved in on 2 classrooms. Several other pupils received minor injuries. The storm came across the Atlantic through Ireland. This morning, gales swept across the south of England, with the worst in Cornwall. They moved by midday across the south coast, with the storm now centred near Glasgow. This evening it's moving out across the North Sea with the high winds all along the eastern coast. Tonight the worst of the storm has passed, but travel is still being disrupted. Despite the conditions, most air services managed to get off the ground, but fierce crosswinds meant many flights needed several attempts at landing.
And that report was compiled by ITN crews and news teams from ITV companies all over the country. Actor Gordon Kaye is in Charing Cross Hospital in London, where he's been undergoing brain surgery. He was driving through London when the freak gust of wind drove a chunk of wood through the windscreen. The hospital say that he's critically ill.
His injuries are, I think, best described as critical, and certainly he'll be removed from theatres to the intensive care unit for very intensive post-operative care.
Are we talking about cerebral injuries?
Yes, he's had very serious head injuries resulting from an accident which, as far as I understand, affected the front of his head.
Over the last few years, he's been a favourite with millions of television viewers for his role as the cafe owner René in the comedy series Allo Allo. Well, with me live in the studio now is ITV's weatherman Alex Hill. Alex, we know that the storm's moving north. Just how quickly?
Well, the actual centre of the storm is now out in the North Sea. That's moving rapidly towards Scandinavia, but it is leaving a sting in its tail. We've got several hours yet, particularly on the eastern side of the country, where winds once again are going to reach at least storm force, gusting probably around 90 miles an hour as far south as East Anglia through the early part of the evening. And then from about till late evening, midnight onwards, the wind steadily dying down, leaving us with a much quieter day for tomorrow.
Well, I know that it's always a complaint when we get a change in the weather, but do you think we got enough warning from the weatherman?
Well, we started warning way back on Sunday when Martin did his broadcast on Sunday evening when he talked about a very stormy Thursday. And continually through the week we've been mentioning storms. Last night we were mentioning storms. And then when it gets really close to the time, the Met Office is well geared up for this sort of thing nowadays.
Alex, thank you very much indeed. And now the rest of the news. The former police chief John Stalker has given the Home Office the document which he says proves there was a plot to remove him from the shoot-to-kill inquiry in Northern Ireland. He claims that the conspiracy existed at the highest levels of Whitehall. The Home Secretary has rejected demands for an inquiry.
Even John Stalker was delayed by the weather, arriving 2 hours late at the Home Office to deliver his much vaunted document to the Home Secretary's office. Afterwards, he revealed that these were notes made by Sir John Herman, Chief Constable of the Royal Ulster Constabulary, at the time that Mr. Stalker was removed as head of the shoot-to-kill inquiry in 1986. Mr. Stalker then quoted passages from Sir John's private memorandum.
Sir John's notes say, I, and by that I presume it means Sir John, express concerns about structure of enquiry, clearly collusion between PM, RA, CS and DPP. I must hold the line.
Mr. Stalker claimed the notes cast new doubts on the theory that no member of government was involved in his removal.
I do believe that it tends to show that my removal from the RUC investigation and from my job in Greater Manchester Police was more than a straightforward decision.
In the Commons, the Home Secretary rejected fresh demands for an inquiry.
But I have no reason whatsoever to believe that anything improper occurred.
John Stalker says that if mistakes were made, they should now be put right, so the case can finally be closed. Jeremy Thompson, ITN at the Home Office.
The Labour leader Neil Kinnock has challenged Mrs Thatcher to admit that she was wrong in supporting ID cards for soccer fans. The Prime Minister refused to confirm that the scheme was being shelved. She told the Commons that the Home Secretary would make a statement on Monday when the Taylor report on the Hillsborough disaster is published. It's believed that Mr Justice Taylor is against ID cards on safety grounds.
Mrs Thatcher walked out of number 10 into a storm today. Inside the Palace of Westminster, so battered by gales that masonry fell from one of the towers and the central lobby was closed, she found an opposition baying for blood over her decision to drop the ID scheme.
Could I invite the Prime Minister to make a little history this afternoon and simply get up and say she was wrong?
Mrs Thatcher would not discuss Lord Justice Taylor's report until it was published, but she did offer advice on how clubs should spend their money.
And perhaps they might consider spending a bigger proportion on the people who come to watch football rather than on transfer fees and other things.
The opposition assault continued. Labour MPs shouted, "Send her off." The Democrats joined in.
After long years of being told that she is not for turning, have we at last reached the point where the lady is at least for learning?
Then former Labour leader Michael Foot suggested she should take the usual action when in trouble and give a minister the chop. The reply was acid.
May I gently inform the right honourable gentleman that I no more need his assistance now than I did when he was leader of the opposition and got the chop.
The loud Tory cheers were partly a relief at an effective counterpunch, but it was an uncomfortable question time for the Prime Minister. Peter Allen, ITN, Westminster.
The company that owned the Herald of Free Enterprise Channel ferry has been sent for trial, charged with manslaughter over the Zeebrugge disaster. Also facing trial are several former employees, including the ferry captain on the night of the tragedy.
The capsize of the Herald of Free Enterprise has already brought verdicts of unlawful killing at an inquest in Dover. Today's decision that P&O European Ferries, the successor company to Townsend Torreson, should be tried for manslaughter along with the other defendants makes legal history. 3 former directors of the company stood in the dock for the 15-minute hearing. All of them said they'd reserved their defence and pleaded not guilty to the charges. Captain David Lurie, master of the ship on the night of the disaster, was also charged with the manslaughter of 4 of those who died, along with senior master John Kirby and 2 other crewmen. It was only after lengthy legal argument by both sides that the magistrate ruled today that a jury should decide whether the defendants were guilty of manslaughter. Because of reporting restrictions, we're not allowed to say why he came to the decision that there was a manslaughter charge to be answered. But as the charges were read out, relatives of those who died at Zeebrugge wept in the court.
In South Africa, members of Mike Gatting's rebel cricket team were faced with more demonstrations when they arrived at the diamond mining town of Kimberley. Over 1,000 people turned out to protest. The rebels play their first match of the tour tomorrow. This report is compiled under South Africa's government restrictions.
From early morning, police mounted roadblocks to seal off Kimberley Airport, turning back the first protesters. But they and police quickly gathered outside the Cricketers' Hotel, where the protest began with the singing of the Black nationalist anthem. The police operation ensured a quiet arrival at the airport, and there wasn't a single demonstrator in sight. But at their hotel, the crowd had swelled to some 2,000. They were then joined delightedly by some 30 hotel staff, pledging not to serve the tourists these South Africans see as unwelcome. The chants and slogans reached a crescendo when the players' bus arrived. Then, instead of entering the hotel, Gatting and tour manager David Graveney accepted an offer to receive a letter of protest and some harsh words.
Thank you. This is from the people of South Africa. Thank you very much. We hope it's the last time that you defy our country, our people and the international community.
Gatting refused any comment on what he'd seen and heard, but this demonstration was by far the largest of the tour so far, and the protesters have pledged to disrupt play when Gatting takes to the field for the first time tomorrow. Kevin Dunn, ITN, Kimberley, South Africa.
The actress Ava Gardener, the former wife of Frank Sinatra, has died at her London home. She was 68 yesterday. She'd been ill for some time after suffering a stroke over 3 years ago. One of Hollywood's biggest stars in the 50s, she turned her back on fame after a stormy marriage with Sinatra. Her best-loved films include Showboat, The Night of the Iguana with Richard Burton, and The Barefoot Contessa alongside Humphrey Bogart. Movie mogul Louis B. Mayer once said of her, "She can't act, she can't sing, she's terrific." The Princess of Wales donned army combat gear today to get a taste of active duty at a top security military base in Northern Ireland. And the 1st Battalion, the Royal Hampshire Regiment, gave her army kit and helmets as presents for Princes Harry and William.
Dressed fully for the occasion, Princess Diana met the troops in her role as Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Hampshires. Delays caused by the severe weather cut back her schedule, but without any ado, she was ushered to the commanding officer's Land Rover to take up what the Army calls top cover position. Her patrol, though, was confined to a drive around Ebrington Barracks, home for the Royal Hampshires, who are nearly halfway through their 2-year tour of duty. In the soldiers' cookhouse, Princess Diana met men who had just returned from foot patrols in Londonderry, chatting quite freely and choosing not to join in any of their light refreshments. She moved on to meet their wives and children who were intrigued by the latest addition to the royal wardrobe. From the boots to a well-tailored combat outfit, complete with the Colonel-in-Chief's insignia. And the regiment had a special gift for 2 royals well below recruitment age. Andrew Simmons, ITN, Londonderry.
And the main story again, the fierce storms battering Britain have left at least 24 people dead. Gordon Kay, the star of Allo Allo, is fighting for his life after a freak accident. Trains in many parts of the country are at a complete standstill. Roads are in chaos. Tonight, the gales are moving north. Damage is already in many millions of pounds. Among the victims were 2 young children killed at school. Finally, it was a golden day for England at the start of competition in the Commonwealth Games in Auckland. England won all 3 medals in the men's 100-metre breaststroke. Adrian Moorhouse equalled his own world record to take gold, with James Parrock and Nick Gillingham winning silver and bronze. And Simon Belither and Andrew Tucker also won a gold in a shooting event.
Moorhouse was chasing his 3rd Commonwealth gold in a row. But if winning his favourite distance wasn't a great problem, he wanted to achieve it with a world record. As they came down the last length, he looked on course. Tucked in behind him, the other 2 Englishmen, Jim Parrock, Moorhouse's training partner, and Nick Gillingham. They finished it 1-2-3.
And he has blown away this field. What a brilliant swim! It's equalled the world record!
Parrock had surprisingly edged Gillingham out of 2nd spot. Moorhouse's time, the same as his own record. His next aim, more gold at the Olympics.
We come here and like the Canadians and Australians talk about themselves being like the best 1 and 2 in the water, but we came here and got all 3 medals in the breaststroke, so that makes me pretty happy.
But Moorhouse's medal wasn't England's first gold performance. Simon Belither and his new partner in the full-bore rifles, Andrew Tucker, shot their way to 1st place. And in the air rifles, Chris Hector and Rob Smith collected the silver from Prince Edward. England's 4-man team in cycling's 100-kilometre race won bronze. It was an event which brought the host nation's first gold medal.
Channel 4 News is next from ITN. That's at 7 o'clock. But that's all from the news at 5:40. From all of us here in the newsroom, have a very good evening.
Good evening. Well, there's no doubting the main weather story tonight. The storms across the southern half of England and Wales. This is just a sample of some of the gusts we've seen during the day today. 85 right up to 110 miles per hour. Further problems further north too, across central parts of Scotland in particular. Very strong winds, drifting snow and blizzard conditions in many places. So all in all, a thoroughly atrocious and very difficult day. Now, the reason for this storm is this deep area of low pressure. It came up from the southwest through the border counties and is now out in the North Sea. So now it's the eastern side of the country getting the strongest winds. And if we take a look at that, I think you'll find that from northeast Scotland right down the eastern side of England, down into East Anglia, for the next 2 to 4 hours, that's where you're likely to see the strongest winds. And in places, once again, gusts up to 90 miles per hour, and further structural damage is still likely. By tomorrow, though, things are an awful lot quieter. Westerly winds coming in from the Atlantic, bringing a mixture of sunny periods and showers. Tonight, though, coupled with the very strong winds down that eastern side, still some rain, sleet and snow to come. Blizzard-like conditions in places, I think, particularly on the Pennines. Might even see some sleet and snow as far south as East Anglia. Through the night, though, that'll drift away, things getting colder with a touch of frost and icy patches on the roads. And further north, holding on to that mixture of clear periods and showers. Tomorrow, well, the chart just about sums it up. The best of any dry weather down the eastern side and in the southeast, where you'll see a fair amount of sunshine and just the occasional shower. Further west, though, an awful lot of showers piling in from the west, particularly over the mountains. Those showers will be heavy, falling as sleet and snow, still a fairly stiff wind. A cold day tomorrow, temperatures generally between 5 and around 7 degrees Celsius. That's a low to mid-40s Fahrenheit, and a wind of about 30 to 35 miles an hour, just below gale force. That's it from me. I'll be back after news at 10.